Hey everyone, you're listening to the Active Turnkey Podcast, a podcast designed for hands-off, passive real estate rental investors. In the Active Turnkey Podcast, you'll hear Tom Olson and Jared Stoutmeister discuss all things turnkey rentals with other turnkey providers, service providers, and rental investors. Our goal is to help you reach your financial freedom and whatever comes after that. Let's go. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Active Turnkey Podcast. I'm your host, Jared Stoutmeister, and I have with me the Tom Olson. And we are back.
We are here again.
Yeah. And so it's 2 in a row. We're on a streak. And we're back in the groove already.
Yes, we said we were going to get back in the groove.
We did.
We're in the groove.
And we've done it.
We are going to knock it out.
Mm-hmm.
Me and Jared are going to do push-ups on air. Just kidding. Air push-ups. Yeah,
Tom's going to do it because he's flexing on me right now. But yeah, we are back for our second podcast. We told you we'd come and talk back today about core values.
Yes, core values.
So we're going to just go through the small talk today, and we're going to go right into the podcast. And so the first one we talked about, we just discussed like the importance of having core values, why you need them, how Tom went about doing his, and how someone should go about creating their core values. And today we wanted you to know ours specifically, and even in the last podcast, you would have gotten the actual core values. Tom named them off a few times, but we wanted to go in a little bit more detail, what that means and how that guides us. And as far as, so there are some of you who may be curious about, what we do and how we do it.
So when we were going through the core values last time, you did ask me a question and I kind of clarified it, but I thought about another way to clarify it. You know how sometimes when you go home and you sleep and then you come back and then you're like, a thought comes to your mind?
I never have thoughts come to my mind in that situation. I don't. I have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh my goodness, Jared is just... He's drawing a blank right now.
Yeah. What was the question?
So you asked me like how we came up with them. How would somebody come up with them? And I said there's basically 2 ways to do it.
I remember that.
And I went in very great detail of how to create your own in a group setting. And then I kind of just left you hanging when it comes to how you create them with a visionary maybe casting what they think they want to do. Well, basically like...
So hold on. Is this going to be bonus information for this podcast?
Bonus information.
Okay.
Just so everybody knows, this is huge.
Man.
This is the second podcast in a row that we've used that word. Huge.
Well, Tom, you used it twice.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good.
Huge. Okay. It's huge, everybody. So if the visionary, if you are just, you're just yourself and you want to create core values for yourself, that's great. You can come up with your own terminology, your own words that mean something to you. And then from there, it just goes to the same process that I gave in the last podcast. And if you didn't listen to the last podcast, then you're going to have to go back and listen to the last podcast. See what I did there?
Yeah,
what I did? That was slick.
Skill.
Yeah,
Experience.
Sorry. We'll get back to this. So from there, it's just getting the words that you've decided. And then you go to the same process that I talked about in the last.
Sure. And
for some reason, it was bugging me, Jared. Ever since we did the last podcast, it has been bugging me that I didn't explain that.
It's been bugging me too. I just didn't want to bring it up.
I told you have thoughts at night, Jared.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm
just
really glad we got that
podcast.
cleared up.
Just not thoughts about the podcast.
No, yeah. I'm glad we got it cleared up, and I feel like now we can move forward.
Now we can move forward. So you've created your podcast. You've created your core values, right?
Yeah.
And you said, okay, mine's going to be integrity. Mine's going to be, I really do love the core value. I've seen this no whiners allowed. I've actually even seen it. No whining. It's actually one of our family rules, but I've actually recently seen this several times with different organizations. And I think maybe we should add that to ours, Jared. Just kidding.
There may be some complaints.
There might be some owners that we have to...
it's a little joke.
Just a little joke. So anyway, you've come up with your terms and the things that you want for that, and then you said this is what we believe, and then after the we believe statements, maybe come up with some things that you can think about that would maybe describe it in a little bit deeper sense, or maybe even a scenario where if you're in this type of scenario, how you can exemplify this core value, or what does it mean? And then I think very importantly, one of the last steps of this is kind of what I call non-negotiables. These are the things that like I'm not going to put up with, and I'm not going to put up with it because it goes back to this core value. We say that, if this is the way somebody is, and at the end of the day, I do think it's important to notate the whole reason why you're doing this is because people are the most important component.
Correct.
When it comes to anything else, when you're reaching your goals, you're trying to become a millionaire, you're trying to get, $200,000 a year in passive income, when you're trying to work out, like at the end of the day, like the people that you work with make all the difference in the world. And it really, like, most of the time, our happiness even is determined on the people that we're with and who we get to interact with. So people are so important. And because people are so important, they're important on how you get to your goals and even in turnkeys. And I know that this kind of might seem like it's a little bit off topic, but we thought it was very important for us. Our core values are very important to us, and we thought that it would be important to you guys as well. So again, I am kind of giving the last podcast a plug again, and go back and listen to the last podcast. We explained why it's so important.
So we're going to jump right in. We have 4 now. Tom, I'd like to go in reverse. So just so you guys know, if you in the next coming weeks, we're going to be sending out a email campaign when you join our list. So we haven't incorporated that
email.
It's going to be like a soap opera. It's
just so you know, it's going to be very
intriguing.
Yes,
there's a lot of drama.
There's going to be lots of drama with music.
Yes,
and you might even get like the little guy that says the plane.
Is that a soap opera?
It was like a long time ago. I'm probably showing my age now, because this was probably like in the 80s.
Yeah, that was way before my time.
Way before Jared's time.
Yeah, no.
Well, it's funny because my uncle looks exactly like him, and I always make fun of my uncle because he looks exactly like that little guy that says "Deep in Pleasure Island," which was a soap opera back in the 80s.
Very good looking. Okay.
I don't know about that. I'm not going to say that. But.
So in that campaign, basically, we're doing what we're doing here. It's a way for you, if you join our list and you've wanted to see our product, we're going to tell you more about ourselves, and we create it to go along with our core values. But what I did is I gave it in reverse. So Tom mentioned it in the last podcast that charity is number one. It's our number one focus. But we did it in reverse, and so I want to do that now. So instead
Jared's
of going
always
to charity,
he's always trying to do things.
I'm shaking it up. Tom said it too.
But no, it's okay. We're going to save the best for last.
There you go.
That's what we're going to do.
I wasn't there yet.
Yes,
I wasn't there yet, and now I don't have to go. So we're going to go, the last to first. So growth is our first one here. And so, I remember when Tom revealed these, and actually I thought charity, stewardship, community seemed to make sense, but growth, I was a little surprised. Cause I guess it does bring in everybody. It's very inclusive in that sense.
Well, and even for me, growth, I feel like it should be for all your other core values even as well, too. So it's like I should be growing in charity, growing in stewardship, growing in community, as well as like growing in my daily disciplines. And I think the way you get to that growth is by the daily disciplines. It's like anything else in life. If you want to get to 100 rentals, most people aren't just going to go out and buy 100 rentals, right? Most people are going to buy one at a time. They're going to go out and buy 2 or 3 or 4 at a time. And eventually they'll get up to their 100 rentals. Most people don't just start out with, $10,000 a month in passive income. It kind of starts with a couple $100. Maybe it's $400 or $500, and then it's $800, and then it's $1,200, and maybe $1,500. And you just keep adding to that. And the only way you hit that is by the daily disciplines. So when we were doing growth, and we as a company, we weren't thinking about growth, I even thought about books that pertain to growth. And I think the 10X rule is a good book when it comes to that. Good to Great, comes to mind when it comes to growth. I think also a very important part of growth is setting goals. Sure. Like as a company, we set goals every single quarter. And then we set yearly goals every year. And we even set weekly goals, and kind of just tracking yourself and making sure that you're hitting those goals are all kind of part of that growth core value for us.
I like it too, because you can start where you are. It really does. So we don't we hire and fire. We do make all of our decisions by our core values, but it's fair to say that no one hits every mark perfectly. It's just not realistic. And so it does hit you where you are. It does give patience. One thing it allows us to do is is to see where people are and judge accordingly. So we don't have to base them upon where we should see them 5 years down the road. It's like, where are you today? And now we can go from there. So I feel like when we're doing our reviews and things like that, we don't. Right. It's not a picture perfect situation. It's where are you? Where were you a year ago? Is there a difference? Is all these different types of things. So I really like that.
And for me, it helps you know the direction you're going, the trajectory in which you're going, because like it's very easy. Numbers don't lie. You can go back and look at where you were a year ago. You can look at where you are today, and you can tell very easily which direction are you headed. Yeah. So for me, that's important. It was important for me to be like, maybe we're not perfect. Maybe somebody doesn't have the best attitude when it comes to being, charity or community, but like, are they better than they were last year? That was important to me. And not like I said, as a leadership team, we created the definitions of these, but what was going through my mind when I said, hey, this is what I think would be good. And I brought it to the team, and I wasn't 100% sold on it. I didn't, say, this is what it's going to be, guys. I don't care what you say. I kind of brought it to them and said, hey, what do you guys think about this? Do you think that these would be ones? And I kind of explained, where I was going and why I picked those 4 and how they were different. They weren't all just about action. They weren't all just about, growth, or, they weren't all just about integrity. They weren't all just about giving. They were, what I'm saying? They were all a little bit differently, or all were a little bit different. So the first thing that we have down here when we're talking about growth is that we are always striving to become better each day. Right? So that's one of those things that if you're trying to grow, our pastor used to say this, and I love, these little, statements that I can remember from people that I've learned from in the past. And he used to say, if I was in a car from, you probably know exactly what I'm talking about now. If I was in a car and I was going from New York to California and I broke down on the side of the road, and for some reason I was in the middle of the desert and I couldn't get anywhere. This was back before there were cell phones, folks, and this was back. Oh, wow. It was a while ago. And he's like, I would at least push my car at least a couple feet, so I knew that I was a little bit closer today than I was yesterday. And that's kind of,
small victories
at the heart of that. Like, are we striving to become better each day, or are we just complacent? To me, it's kind of like almost like an anti-complacent call. Like, I'm just I'm not satisfied. I may be content. That's a whole different ballgame. Sure. Contentment's different than being satisfied, but I'm not quite set. I know I can get better. And I know that that's the case.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. If you're not striving to become better each day, we believe that if you're not growing, you're dying. Those are excellent things.
And that's a true thing. I mean, yes. If you're not growing, you have to understand there's no such thing as sitting still. Yeah. And you're basically going backwards.
Yeah. So in the email campaign, if you get a chance to read it, one thing I talked about is when you're younger, growth is very visible, especially over time. I mean, when you see somebody like I told a story at my grandparents' house. They would mark on the door frame as you got taller, and it was something that could be measured easily, and you were excited about it. But as you get older, it becomes more difficult to notice. It really does. Now, I guess we can tell when we're getting older, but maybe not when we're growing as much. And we can tell by the gray hairs. Yeah. But I kind of, in my opinion, I see this, and it's true. But I also flipped the phrase, Tom. And so I haven't told you about this yet. I also put, if you're not dying, then you won't grow. And it's kind of the idea of the realization that you don't just grow by osmosis. Eventually, you have to put in the work. And it's the realization, okay, now I'm not relying on my abilities anymore, the natural piece of growth.
Yep. But it's also kind of like, when I was a child, I spake as a child. When I became an adult, well, now I have to put away those foolish things. I got to put away those things. Yeah. And sometimes growth is also about saying no to things. I mean, that's why in our quarterly meetings, we have stop it. We don't just talk about our goals and where we want to go next quarter. We want to say, what are the things that are going to distract us? Yeah. And how do we make sure that we don't do these things because our goals are important to us? And these things are just getting in the way, and they're causing people to whine and complain and whatever. But we're just going to stop doing it because it's just not worth it for us.
It's stunting.
So you're exactly right. So it's if you're not growing, you're dying. But if you're not going to die, if you're not going to die to self sometimes, you're really not going to grow.
Right. Yeah. So there's more to it out there. But if you want to take a look at that, it'd be great. But when we believe when we fail forward.
So again,
it's a lot of mindset.
For me, yeah, it's a lot about mindset of when we do fail, like it's okay. When something doesn't, not that like that's what we want. That's not the goal.
Yep.
But what are we gonna learn from this? I mean, that's what fail forward means to me, is that even though I failed, even though something didn't go the way I wanted it to go, if I could learn these 3 things from it, and now I implemented that for all the new future properties and all the new future things that we do, I think that's a win.
Yeah.
And that's, kind of the mindset behind that.
Well, growth is hard.
Yes.
It is hard. And in the end, one thing that we want to make clear is that, and Tom, you've heard Tom many times on the podcast, that we're not perfect. And I appreciate that. And so if there are companies that present themselves as perfect, we say we're not. Now we're striving, even by our own core value here. But what we want to say is that we believe, because we're not perfect, we still have a long way to go in growth. Like we believe there's some opportunities there. And so we're not perfect. We probably never will be.
And I think
but
I think you flip that upside down. I think the people that think that they're there, like, to me, you're in a very dangerous position.
Sure.
If you think you know it all and like you're just God's gift to this world, like, and everybody should just look up to you, like you are, know all, say all. Everything that you say comes out of your mouth is exactly truth and exactly the way it is. Like, I probably don't trust you. Yeah. Number one, and number two, I think you're full of bull. But really, like, that's what I see. Like, as soon as somebody gets to the point where they think they know it all, then they've really they decline very, very quickly. Pride cometh before a fall, and all those things kind of come into mind when it comes to that.
So after we kind of identify what it looks like, then we say what it's not. So we have here, that means people who tend to be a know-it-all, like you said, or reactive instead of proactive. And that's, again, a plan. You plan to grow and you plan to be proactive. Or unproductive may not fit in here. And so that's how we evaluate growth. So number 2, so we're going backwards. And so the second one is community. Now that's something that we talk about a lot. And Tom, this is a buzzword.
You got it. It is a buzzword.
Everybody's talking about community.
Now they are.
Yeah.
After we decided they were our core values.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's even secularly, or especially in the religious setting, community is a word people talk about.
You got it. Yep.
And it is something I think sometimes we do forget that we are in communities. In fact, I could argue we're in a lot more communities than we think. And we can be in any kind of community right now.
You got it. I mean, we're in a community right now of just our office.
Yeah.
We're in a community of each, and it's funny because each one of our companies almost has their own little community, their own little culture to a certain degree. When we go to church, we're in our own community. When we go to school, we're in our own community. When we go in our community, our actual where we live, we're in a community. Sure. When we go into the communities in which we are, flipping houses or buying houses or owning houses, we're in a community. So community can be a lot of different things. We're having an event here in a couple of weeks. It's kind of a community of real estate investors. Yeah.
Even personally, like I'm a Cubs fan, so there's a Cub fan community. Or if you like to ride a bike,
Cubs are not doing so good this year.
No, it's okay.
We're gonna skip that.
They had a walk-off homer last night.
Yes,
so I'm happy.
they finally won one.
Yeah, they won 8 out of 9. Okay.
They're going to make the playoffs and win the World Series.
So I'm a big fan. But you're talking about communities, and there's all these many ones that you're connected to, and some of them, I actually think there's some that you probably may not even want to be connected to because of different scenarios. Yep. Food, what you eat, or whatever. There's different things like that. But one of the ways we define this is we are the change we want to see. We make it all about the people.
So again, like if you want your community to be better, I think most people that go out in a community and they want the community to be better, they just start barking orders. And they're like, you need to change, and you need to change, you need to change. Yeah. For us, we believe like the community starts here. People say the buck stops here, and I love that statement. I think it's good when it comes to leadership, but when it comes to the community, like how good of a community you have has just as much to do with you as every other individual that's in the community. Another statement that I can remember hearing about a father giving, or maybe it was a mother, I'm not sure if it was a father or mother, giving advice to a daughter, and the daughter was about ready to go to a party, and the girl wasn't very happy about going to it. She didn't really like maybe the people that were there, and she's like, I'm probably not going to have a good time. And the advice that the parent gave was, well, you know what? Do you want to have a good time? And she's like, yes. Do you want to have a party? And she's like, yes. Well, then her words were, well, then bring the party with you. And that's really kind of what this talks about. Sure. Bring the party with you. You're You're the community. You're just as much of the community as anybody else. So make the buck stop here with you. You be the catalyst. You be that first person that says, hey, I want to see this change, so I'm going to be willing to help make this change, which is partly what we've done in Gary, Indiana. You know, like 4 years ago, nobody was doing what we're doing. And we said, you know what? We want to be the change that we want to see. So we're going to make these houses look the way we want them to see or want them to look.
And it's really interesting. If you think about community, it's where people live together. Typically, that's like the definition of the word. And when you think about when a community breaks down, typically a community breaks down when people are not doing what is in the best interest of the community. And so, and it's interesting, it starts with me. So if I go into the community making demands, I am now putting myself above the community. If you have to do, the whole community needs to go by what I think and what I say, I am no longer doing it in the best interest of the community. Now I'm doing it in the best interest of me. And it's an easy way to break down that community.
It's a very anti-community mindset.
Absolutely. As opposed to, again, this may not help me. And so sometimes even in business here at Olson Group, departments or different employees may have to understand that, hey, I know that this isn't in your best interest as far as like maybe you have to do this extra task, but in the end, it is in the best interest of the company and it's something you need to do. And so here in community, that's what we want to do. So that means...
Is that like doing these podcasts, Jared?
Absolutely. It's in your best interest, so we do it. Yeah. So community, that means people who tend to be unwilling to help others, or people who tend to be the lone wolf, or people who are deceptive may not fit in here.
Yeah. So if you don't have the best interest of the community, then you don't fit in here. Yeah. If you are, and to me that's pretty wide. It's a pretty wide, that one's not as specific as some of these other, non-negotiables that we have. But for us, the community is important, and for us, our community is important, and the people that we want to work with is important. You did skip over one that I did want to hit a little bit on, but we also say something here that we're a group of people that support each other's needs by challenging each other to face our fears and encourage one another to have fun. So, I think fun is an important part of any community.
Sure.
But I think there's also a component of there are emotions that go on in every single one of us, especially if you think about the last 18 months, everybody at some point has probably been afraid of COVID, at least for a little bit of time. Sure. I think some of us have gotten over this a little bit and have kind of even been through it twice, like myself, and we're no longer afraid of it. But it's something where in life, we've had 3 or 4 people in our office that have bought houses since they started working here because we've taught them how to buy houses. They had to face that. And as a community, you want to encourage other people and challenge them to be their best as well. So it's not just about you, all about you, but it is about you to start. And then from there, it's okay, once I have brought the party and once I've brought my good attitude and once I've, brought the party to the community, how can I also make the community better?
Which is another take on growth. So you're trying to grow others within your community as they face their fears. It's really good.
Yeah.
So we got 2 more, and we're really, again, it is something where they're going up in importance as far as how I think what we would say from our company's perspective. And the next one's stewardship. Now, again, I think we would say our community is important, but this is where we're talking about us providing a service to a client. And there are some people
or each other or employees of the company.
Yes.
It kind of goes back to the community. These all tie together a little bit.
Very much. Yep. And well, again, stewardship is it's not a word that's commonly used right now. It's an older word. I'm trying to think of what word we would use typically. It would be your property manager, for instance. And so you don't have
so if you go back in the Old English language, you actually look at stewardship, and there's basically 2 main words that will come out. Either manager of stuff, or manager of something, or servant to a certain degree. So, we could have very easily put servanthood here, or servant leadership, or something to that effect. But I felt like stewardship was the better way to go about that.
So I did, we're writing this as part of our soap opera campaign that's going to be going out to our new people that come in. I did a little bit of a study on the 2 words, like manager and steward. And one thing that was really interesting to me is, in general, people debate on which one does what. But it seemed to me that a manager takes what they're given and they make it work. So in baseball, you have a manager of a baseball team, and he has 25 or 26, now it's 26 players on his roster. and he's responsible for those 26 players. He's not responsible for anything else. And technically, he could complain that the things he's given was not enough to win. Whereas from studying a stewardship, he is managing, but he's also responsible for, it goes beyond the management piece where, you know what I'm saying, where it's not just management. Right. It seemed like in stewardship now, he's also responsible for
the success of
success,
whatever that is.
If there's a problem that's beyond the managing, now how do we solve it? What's next step? And so it's really interesting, the difference. And so that's where I felt like stewardship was even better used in this situation, because as an investor, you wouldn't want your property manager to say, well, here's the issue, I'm sorry. You would want them to figure out the best way to get it done.
Unfortunately, most property managers, that's how they are.
Absolutely.
They just say, this is what I've been given. There's nothing else I can do.
Yeah.
And a great example of that was during COVID. Like, most property managers were not super proactive when it came to the whole thing. Most of them did not change their processes until maybe just recently.
It's true.
And most of them didn't really help their tenants get the money that was available through other different programs. That's good. And which I think, and again, our property management is not perfect. I will never claim it is. We always have something that comes up and issues that we're solving. And there's probably things that we miss every now and then, or things fall through the cracks. But like, I know when it comes to those items I just mentioned, we were very proactive about that. We made changes way back in like last April.
Yeah.
And we even changed the way that we will allow new people to come in way back then. It's funny because I mentioned Mr. Landlord, who's actually one of my coaches and somebody that I've learned a lot from. And he just implemented that this year, like in July.
Oh, interesting.
And he went and wrote this big, article about it. But I'm like, we've been doing this since like a whole year and a half ago. We've been, and what it was that we're forcing new tenants to bring in their last 3 months, and then we go and verify that they actually did pay their last 3 months before they come to us. And so to me, like, that's a good example of a good steward, like somebody that's not just taking what they're given,
right,
but they're taking what they're giving and trying to multiply, trying to make it better, trying to get more for rent than what like just the average old rent would get, trying to do what they can, to be better than just a manager.
Yeah, that was really interesting, and not just how well, again, like a good manager wants it to work to its highest efficiency, but there's still a limitation. I thought the steward, again, it's talking profitability and all these different things. It's a really interesting concept. But
so we define it a little bit deeper. Like we say we're faithful in the little things. And to me, like, the little things matter, because you might not think that $100 is a big deal, but as if it stacks up over and over and over again, it's a big deal. Yes. We maximize what we've been entrusted to us, or what's been entrusted to us, with our time and our commitments. We manage our responsibilities the way the owner would prefer. We're always trying to figure out how our owners, and again, this goes from employee to employer to community member to the community. Like Jared said, what's in the best interest of the community? Well, what's in the best interest of the company? What's in the best interest of the owner? Sure. And sometimes even what's in the best interest of a tenant, even though the house doesn't belong to them, their living does still belong to them, and they are part of our community. So we do want to try to think about what's in the best interest of them. So basically, that means that people that tend to waste time or waste resources, or people that tend to pass the buck or try to blame everybody else for everything else, and or choose convenience over doing what's right, or people that tend to bury their talent, so to speak, as the story from Matthew 25 would talk about, might not fit here.
Yeah, so it's very important, and again, it is an older word, but I think it's fitting for what we want. And in the end, I think that description is what every investor really wants from their property manager.
I agree.
And so the last one, but the most important, and really in the end, there's the drum roll. Tom loves drum rolls. He really does. He would drum roll for the drum roll.
I love drums.
But it is the last one, and really in the end, it does encompass. It could encompass even these, really, if you want it to. But it is charity, some could say love as far as the difference, if you're studying scripture and things like that. But in this case, charity. Again, Tom has talked about this even in the last podcast. But we actively serve the needs and desires of others. We give selflessly of our time, talents, and treasures. And again, that's costly. That costs something.
Well, it's interesting. This just happened to me, Jared. So this is fresh in my mind. Ooh. I actually had an investor And we've done a bunch of work for him this year to be able to get properties up to a better standard. And he didn't for him track each expense onto which property it was. So he actually asked me if I could like go through and mark which ones for which properties. And you might think to yourself, well, man, like that guy could have done that. He could have went through and he could have looked at the receipt. The receipt, they have all the addresses on there. But like I had to say, well, what's more important? Is it more important for me to like be right?
Sure.
Or is it more important for me to just to like help the guy out? He's asking me to help. And, this is a way that I can actively serve. Like, so I just figured it out for him. I wrote him down and I sent him back to him and his accountant. And I was happy to do that. And that is just, I know that's a super small example, but to me, like that's how that particular part of our charity, we believe, is played out. I think in the grand big picture, it's the whole purpose. I said this in the last podcast of why I do what I do. I don't have all these businesses because I need to make a living. I don't make all these businesses because I want to retire someday. I have all these businesses. I have created these opportunities for investors. I've created opportunities for our employees and for other people, really at the end of the day, because I want to live out my life in this mode. Like if I'm in charity mode, I'm at my best self. It's true. I'm out in Guatemala. I was in Guatemala a couple weeks ago and just got to see how people live down there. And it will break your heart if you really let it, kind of think about that. And then saw like the people that were taking care of the people from there, our missionaries or people that run orphanages or people that are just trying to help the communities and how they sacrifice we would consider sacrificial living in a way that they can kind of live out this core value. And for me, like, I want to be able to support those types of people. You've heard my 2 goals is to flip the city of Gary, Indiana, and to give away $1 billion. But I think it's not just giving away the money. It's like, what is it going to change? What are the communities that are going to change? And then how can I grow in that giving? How do I get to the point where, I can make those 2 goals a reality? And I know the only way I'm going to be able to do that is by growth, is by, cultivating my communities, and is by being a good steward to the opportunities that I've been given. So at some point, maybe God blesses me or trusts me with more opportunities or larger, type of situations.
It's interesting. I think that's excellent. And I think what Tom is saying, he's going and doing these things out of love for others. I was reading a book recently in the last couple of years, and not to get too spiritual, but more or less what a question was asked in a panel, and how somebody would understand the will of God. And he answered it by saying, or basically, how does someone find it? And the guy who answered it said, "Go wherever your gifts will be exploited the most." And that thought just stuck in my mind. I just couldn't get it. I couldn't stop thinking about it, because in many cases we don't like exploitation, but that is what charity is. Charity is where you're like, you know what? I have this gift, and I'm actually going to let it be, if we want to say exploited, or use.
Another good term is use.
Yes.
And to me, it all goes back to, again, if you have known me from the good success days, which I still have good success stuff that we have going on, but I used to always say, be a conduit, not a bucket. Work to have to give. It's actually on my shirt, work to have to give. To me, that's what we're giving. What's running through our conduit is love. Like that's what it is. It is charity. That's what it actually is. I kind of look at the actual conduit as stewardship. If I don't take care of my conduit, that is flowing love through, flowing money through, flowing opportunity through, that conduit is now going to end up exploding someday, or having cracks in it, or holes in my bucket, as you've heard people say. And my community is what I'm connected to. What is my am I connected to somebody on one side that is encouraging me, or I'm being able to make money from, and then am I connected on somebody else, another side, to go encourage somebody else, or to offer an opportunity to somebody else, or to give money or give resources, and we even say it in this next statement here, we're give selflessly of our time, talents, and treasures. It's not just all about money, but it's about opportunity. It's even about your own network. And so that's what community is. And growth to me is, am I making my conduit bigger? Am I able to let more flow through, or am I connected to more communities? Like, how can I connect myself to more communities? And so all that flows together. The whole be a conduit, not a bucket, speech that I've given many times flows through all 4 of these core values that we have as well. And that's kind of, that's how I think about this whole thing. And that's what I wanted our companies to be.
Now, again, these have a heavy spiritual ring to them. They certainly do. And it's not something that we're ashamed of or we hide necessarily. But in the end, here's the situation. Whatever you feel about that, in the end, all this is moot. It's all for nothing if we don't abide and go by these rules. If anything, it has the reverse effect. The things that we actually do believe are injured. They're hurt by that. So there are times when we don't, in our not unhealthy position, you said in your healthy situation, in our unhealthy state where we don't want to do that. We don't want to do any one of these things.
Because
we want to be selfish.
Up going back to selfishness.
Right.
You got it.
Right. We want to be selfish. However, it's when we're sacrificial. And there are some investors who would say that there are times when Olson Group has done things they didn't have to do, but we did it anyway because, again, we were trying to live by these core values. And so anyway.
But honestly, so that means like if you are the type of person that is going to try to take advantage of somebody else.
Interesting.
Like, so there'll be some people that will see our core values,
Yeah.
honestly, and they'll say, look, well, I'm going to take advantage of that because my core value really is like, I want to make the most money I possibly can. I don't really care about anybody, or I don't really care about anybody else or any community or anything, but I'm going to take advantage of that. Honestly, like, I don't want to work with you, and I don't think you really should want to work with me. There will be people that may at some point want to try to exploit, like you say that, but we just want to continue to try to live, the best way we can. Because I believe that charity is, again, it's not just giving, it is a way of living. And then we kind of finally define that as that means that people that tend to use other people just to get what they want, or people who tend to make it all about them and not about both parties here. I love when people are always trying to figure out how we can have win-win. How is this good for you and how is this good for me? Or people that tend to be conditional participants in charity might not fit here.
Yeah, so these are all, again, we could say they're heavy in religious tones but it is something
part
we're
of me
passionate about.
and I'm okay with that.
Yeah,
I'm not
agree.
saying I don't want to work with people that don't have any kind of religious beliefs.
Right.
But I want to make sure that you know who I am and that you knew from day one that we're being genuine and we're trying to do the best we possibly can.
Now, the other thing is we don't just trumpet this either. Frankly, to the point where we want you to trust us first before we can prove ourselves in these same things. Like we want to more or less reveal all of this as we prove it through our actions and the way we do things. And so we're not asking you necessarily to trust us in all these things. If you're looking to invest with Olson Group and you're thinking about starting a portfolio, we're not going to ask you to trust us because of these things, because really in reality we have to prove that. And so really, as we button all this up, this was our way of you getting to know a little bit more specifically. We try to be broad in general, in turnkey space in general, but we wanted you to know more about us, how we operate, what guides us, how we make our decisions. And it's through these core values and through our core focus. And so just know, as we cap it off, know we do build rental portfolios for investors. So if you're looking to work with a company who has these types of core values, we'd like to try to work with you as well. You can reach me at jared@buyolsongroup.com, or you can connect us at buyolsongroup.com. You can join our buyers list there as well. And Tom, are we still marketing?
So we do have an event. I'm not quite sure when this podcast is going to go out. It may be really close to the event. But if you don't have something going on, October 8, 9, and 10, we'd love to host you here at our office. We will have about 80 to 100 people here. We're going to have a big party on October 8th. Food trucks. We're going to have a good fun time. And then on the 9th and 10th, we've got national speakers that are going to be here to just teach about real estate. And it'll be a great networking event. And really, it's been a long time since a lot of people have gotten out and actually networked, good with real estate investors. And we're hoping to be able to provide that for everybody. It's free. It's called the Real Estate Free for All. So it's free to everybody. We do have sponsors that have paid to have booths. So please come and support them. in here as well. But if you're interested in that, you can go to goodsuccess.com and find out more information there. We can invite you to the Facebook group once you sign up for that, and you can find out about all the details for that there. If this has brought you value, I would love for you guys to go onto one of the podcast platforms and give us a 5-star review and tell us what you like about our podcast, whether it's Jared's funniness or maybe it's how smart he is or how much Tom needs to improve, whatever it is that you guys want to give us a thumbs up or a 5-star review. We would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Active Turnkey.
The best way to buy rentals.
Thanks, guys. Olson Group Network makes no warranty, guarantee, or representation as to the accuracy or sufficiency of the information featured in this podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. This podcast should not be considered professional advice. Unless specifically stated otherwise, Olson Group Network does not endorse, approve, recommend, or certify any information, product, process, service, or organization presented or mentioned in this podcast, and information from this podcast should not be referenced in any way to imply such approval or endorsement. Any third-party materials or content of any third-party site referenced in this podcast do not necessarily reflect the opinions, standards, or policies of Olson Group Network. Olson Group Network assumes no responsibility or liability for the accuracy or completeness of the content contained in third-party materials or on third-party sites referenced in this podcast or the compliance with the applicable laws of such materials and/or links referenced herein.